Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the library tour of Doom, being conducted by Lord Ganesha and myself in order to toughen your bookish fiber by taking you through a tour of my books. Not bookcase by bookcase, not subject by subject, not shelf by shelf, but book by book. One book a day until they're done. And that is all the books that I currently own. There's all the books that I have in my book inventories that I don't currently own anymore, but have copious opinions about, and every ebook that I have. So we're going to be here a while. The only person who'll still be alive when it's all over is Lord Ganesha. But today we're going all the way back to the 60s. And this is a Pelican paperback. Penguin, it was a kind of an offshoot of Penguin Classics where there were these cheap, well-made Pelican classics that were not reprints of canonical literature, but rather books of theoretical or intellectual inquiry. And some of them are quite good. They are not reprinted. They are gone. I don't know why that is. I really don't. But this one is by George Watson, an Australian-born critic and editor named George Watson. It's called The Literary Critics. And it is sort of a narrative tour through the people who write about the writings of other people, starting with what Watson very accurately describes as the father of all of that profession in the modern era, which is John Dryden. It was started in the ancient world long before that by, among other people, my beloved Horace. But Dryden is the one who brought it into the light of day, even though, as Watson points out, I think accurately, Watson was, among other things, a very good Dryden editor who did an edition of Dryden's nonfiction, did an edition of his more or less what you could call his critical works that I really wish I could find. But an old scholarly edition of something like that, it might turn up at the Brattle Bookshop, but it's a long shot. Fortunately, the works themselves are available free of copyright. It's his commentary that I would want. I have read it. I have read that Dryden set, but that was a long time ago at a library, at a research library. But he correctly points out that in his own day, Dryden would not have understood the distinction of the father of descriptive English literary criticism. That's Watson's term for descriptive criticism, is critics who just get right in there and talk about the books on the table. And he goes through the whole list of them, starting with Dryden and his few scattered antecedents and going through Johnson and Arnold and everybody else, all the way to what is more or less his own present day, with, for instance, T.S. Eliot and Empson and Seven Types of Ambiguity and all that sort of thing. Those are the final chapters in this book. And there are excerpts, but the main joy of this thing is Watson's own prose. It's his own amazing intellect. I wonder if we have a picture of him. Oh, we do. Okay, but it's unfortunate. Okay, well, anyway, he lived for a while. He was a prominent editor and literary figure, and he also, I want to say, he started off his career. I don't know if it was the first book that he ever wrote, but it was a very early book when he was still they claimed to being an angry young man. He wrote a work of political theory, of political, almost demagoguery, although the writing is so crystallinely beautiful that demagoguery sounds like the wrong thing to call it. It was called The Unservile State, and I believe it's out of print. I think everything about this author is out of print, and this book is out of print, and all the Pelican classics are out of print. What can I say? What can I say? One way or another, it's his narration of what's going on here and the various changes in attitude among literary critics, as, for instance, literary production got faster and cheaper. So that suddenly, 200 years beforehand, you might have someone in Dryden's era who might have critical things to say about some of the books that he's just read, but who would he say them to? It's only a tiny fraction of the public that is able to read them, much less able to buy them. Whereas as the narrative of the book goes on, that changes. More and more people will read, and there's more and more to read. And there come into existence gradually, slowly, haltingly, critical journals that are devoted to nothing but that. And this chronicles it all. It's an amazingly stiffening type of prose that Watson writes. Just he wrote a bunch of other stuff. I wish I had any of it. This is the only thing of his that I have. But if you are, for instance, at some sort of a paperback bookstore and you see this thing, a copy of this moldering down at the bottom of a pile, I believe that's where I found this in a situation very much like that. Grab it if you're interested, because as in so many cases when I praise one of these very old, very out of print books, once you start reading it, it won't feel old and out of print. It feels electric. So that is your book for today in the Library of Tour of Doom. It's The Literary Critics. Close to my own heart, of course, because it's in one way or another my profession. I'm not as good at it as any of the people in his book, but nevertheless, a try. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.